And what's up, guys? We're back. I'm going to talk with my buddy Phalaris here, who's one of the coaches on NEACE.gg site. Great coach, great jungle guy. Yes, he's the man. He's here. We're basically going through the patch notes, the jungle changes, because he spent a lot more time than I have looking over them, actually. And we're going to get some opinions and discuss what we think is going to be broken and what's not going to be broken. I wanted to gear this more towards the newbie or newbies, mainly because I feel like I mean, obviously my channel is what my channel is. There's a lot of newer players around here, but I obviously have coached a ton of like Mundo, Hecarim, Nocturne, like power farming styles. And we're going to get into that and how if those junglers are going to hold up and what junglers are going to be kind of cropping up or any of those little details. Now, like he just said, as we were going live, he was talking about how this is probably going to be a lot of conjecture. Why do you feel that way?
Big changes, big patches like this, like oftentimes a lot of people are going to have pretty educated, pretty decent opinions, but it just plays out a little bit differently, right? You just got to see the stats. You got to wait for things to play out a little bit to really know what's going to be good, what's going to be bad. We can like make our best guesses, but you know, in the end, it's like better when it's backed up with a little bit of stats and time.
Yeah, there's always been those weird cases, right, where things have just become meta and it seems like it was overnight. I know that you were friends with Aribo, the Udyr guy, but
I still talk with him every day.
Yeah, that big Udyr spike that happened at the beginning of the season, I don't think most people knew about it until it showed up.
Nobody would have expected that, right? It just like happened and slowly started spreading, and then all of a sudden.
The only reason I felt like I had any visibility on it is because I was talking to that guy the season before, and then I tried Udyr with the new items, and I was like, ooh. For sure. This looks pretty good. But most of the time, it's kind of like things that pop into the meta. You weren't really, I mean, could we have really predicted Karthus being as crazy as he was initially?
Exactly. That's why I'm like wary about establishing like really clear tier lists and stuff like that, because it's like it's useful to some degree, but you know, you really don't know until the patch really gets going. Has like maybe a week or two to get going.
So we'll go through the list. Throughout the patch notes history, junglers changing ways push PvE prowess to the highest levels of importance, where the priority is to farm fast to get ahead of the experience curve. This is even more pronounced at higher levels of play. The champion pool is narrowed down to the competitive clearing capabilities, making jungle a solved system and a scary place when you fall behind. To address this, we're relaxing camp timers to allow for more leniency on pathing through the jungle. We're also reinstituting an improved version of the comeback experience, which only kicks in after a jungler is significantly behind in the game. Now, if that's the case, it shouldn't feel impossible to win with. The talent or the intent isn't so that a strategy is born out of the comeback mechanism, but instead to limit the number of games that truly feel out of hand. Do you agree with this?
Tentatively, yeah, actually. I don't agree with all of their changes. I don't think all of them quite hit the mark. But tentatively, you mean from
an introductory standpoint? I'm saying like what they're trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's generally what they're trying to accomplish, and I think generally that's actually what they did accomplish.
And you feel as though, to be clear, because I'm going to pick your brain on this concept a little bit, just to add as a difference of opinion, and I think it's entertaining. Do you feel that the jungle was solved, as they say here?
By and large, from like a competitive standpoint, yeah. They're like jungle's been really stale for like the last month or 2 or 3 months, especially in competitive. There's not a lot of wiggle room you could go with the 2-minute respawn timers. They were quite low, and it's just so punishing to have been playing like a gank jungler. Because the farm jungler would just be farming it out, full clearing on repeat. Especially the faster guys, they can get a gank in before returning to the next rotation. It's a very reliable way to get ahead. And the gank junglers would just be it's a coin flip, right? Whether your gank works or not. And the appropriate systems just like weren't in place to keep gank junglers and like gank jungling as relevant.
It's interesting that you say that, because, and the reason that I'm going to bring this up is, and this is why I wanted to get your opinion on it, is because I don't know if I'm entirely sold on this idea that it was only power farmers that worked. And the reason why I say this is obviously there's cases where there's stuff out there like friggin' Kanes, the Morganas, which are like out of control, the Hecarims, the Udyrs. Obviously we had like the Chem Tank, we had these are obvious power farmers, but there were tons and tons of cases, especially if you looked at like China solo queue, if you looked at like Korean solo queue, where you would have these picks that seemed fine from a win rate standpoint, from a result standpoint.
Things like Elise, right? Elise,
you got the Elise, you got the Lee Sin that still exists. You had the Talia, who's been around forever. The Rek'Sai's been around forever. You would have even the Nidalee, who's been around forever. I guess you could argue Nidalee's a power farmer more than a gank jungler, although I think we could agree to disagree in some points there with that.
Yeah, there's some flexibility there.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I find it interesting that you view it that way in the highest levels of play, because I'm not entirely convinced that that is completely the case.
I think the distinction we need to make here is between solo queue and pro play.
Okay.
Because pro play, we saw very little of anything other than Hecarim, Udyr, right? The
That's
hard
fair.
farm junglers. Because the amount of gank potential you have in pro play is much lower, right? You don't get the same free opportunities that you do in solo queue. Now, when it comes to solo queue, I completely agree. I do think farm junglers were more dominant, but I can't recall a single patch in like the last 10 years where either farm junglers or gank junglers have been irrelevant in solo queue. Solo queue, you can always play both. Now, based on the meta, one is going to be stronger than the other, but there's never been a patch where either playstyle has been invalidated.
Yeah, because the way I view it from my perspective is, I feel like this has been the first time in a long time where you've actually seen so many junglers that aren't Elise and like high elo, right? Which aren't just like Elise, Lee Sin, you know, fucking Rek'Sai. Like it was Nunu. It felt like it was Nidalee. All those same ones were so dominant for years past. And it definitely seems to me like as soon as it went towards a farming meta, it was immediately like, right, it's like, okay, let's just swap back, right? Because that's how it feels to me right now. It's like a swap back.
I don't have my timeline completely straight, but the way I remember jungling is back in, I think, like season 6 or so, maybe it was season 7, season 6, the camp respawn timers were way lower. I think they were like 90 seconds back then, a minute and a half. And then they changed it and moved it all the way up to 2.5 minutes. And I think that was around season 8, something like that.
Yeah.
That's when the competitive meta was all like Lee Sin, Elise, just the hard gank junglers. And then they shifted it down to 2 minutes, and that's when farm jungling slowly started picking up. And then now they're kind of shifting it back over to like a happy balance between the two. And I'm expecting both playstyles to be actually fairly well balanced, to be fairly viable.
Cool. Let's talk about the jungle, the timers, and the gold. So as you just talked about, the respawn timer is now 2:15, and now you've got a 10-second indicator. The way I foresee this is, I already personally, and I was talking to you about this before we went live, I already felt like Hecarim and Mundo and even Udyr took quite a big hit from the changes already. And now I feel like there's not much of an excuse to play Mundo, Hecarim. I mean, I guess Udyr will still be okay in theory, but I'm not really in love with the idea of picking him in solo queue for like a crazy win rate.
Okay, there's several perspectives that I want to like approach the 2:15 change from.
Okay, cool.
The first is that it's 15 seconds. It's not the end of the world. We've seen much larger shifts in camp respawn timers in the past. 15 seconds is substantial, don't get me wrong, but it's still 15 seconds, right? It's not the end of the world. 15 seconds is not going to invalidate any farm play style, right? Especially if you're looking at, for example, early game rotations. You take your first spawn of camps, right? And then typically your second spawn comes up somewhere around the 4-minute mark, and they start respawning linearly from there, right? You take your second spawn, you do some ganking. If you got lucky, you'd hit level 6 somewhere around that time before your second spawn of buffs came back up.
Got it.
So if we look at that situation now, the second spawn is going to be delayed by 15 seconds. It sucks, but you know, it is what it is. And the third spawn of camps is going to come up roughly in line with the second buff spawns. And that's going to be around when you're hitting level 6 anyways. The early level benchmarks have not really shifted significantly. And throughout the game, you do lose out a little bit, right? Each spawn of camps is coming in later and later. But again, it's not the end of the world. It's 15 seconds. Let's just be, you know, reasonable about that. Now, where this does come into play is especially in the first rotation. This actually changes some early pathing decisions pretty significantly, I think. More so not for the power farming junglers, but rather for the slower junglers and the gank junglers. So for example, if you take something like Lee Sin, Elise, a really typical early game pattern, right, is they'll clear 3 camps. They'll go gank a side lane for pressure, and then they'll hop in, take Scuttle Crab, and then they'll try to get some regank pressure on that lane. And in that time, the enemy junglers, Krugs and Raptors, their second spawn of camps would be respawning, right, around that 4-minute window. So after Scuttle, those guys would be hanging around for regank potential and maybe counter jungling 1 or 2 of the respawned camps. Now, that is invalidated now. Right, that 15-second window, it's going to spawn so much later for that first rotation that's not really going to be a thing anymore. The camps just aren't going to be there. So the opportunity cost of hanging around there is going to be quite high now. So when it comes to first rotation pathing like that, I think we may actually see some significant change. Where this also comes into play is with the slower full clearers, right? If you think about champions like Kha'Zix, for example, Graves, maybe Zac. Zac is actually pretty fast now, but the average Zac is still a little bit slow. These champions were under really bad time pressure in their early rotations. You would go through a full clear, you'd grab Scuttle, and by the time you're done with Scuttle, your second rotation of camps would almost be respawning already. So if you stuck around to gank to try to put out some pressure, you're kind of running the risk of losing your spawns on the other side if you get there late and the enemy jungler goes in and takes it. Now, you have a decent window of time now to actually do something before backing or returning for your second spawn of camps on these junglers. So I think there's been a decent amount of flexibility given to these champions that still like clearing, but they're a little bit slower in their path.
No, that's good. The way I'm visualizing it in my head is when I hear that 15 seconds, and that's a really good point that you raised too, in regards to just like, how does that connect into the other side of the map, like into the enemy junglers' camps? Like the classic rotation that I can think of is that you full clear, and then you wind up on the enemy top side, and then you think, maybe I stay here and try to take these golems when they pop up, right? And you have that little debate, right? That little decision point. One of the things I see happening in my head now a lot, any champion, I feel like there's going to be a substantial amount of buff in my head to any champion. The Morg, the Nidalee, maybe even the Morg and the Nidalee are the big ones that pop in my head, because I can just visualize it where they just fling Qs over the wall in a mid or top, just like they used to. It feels like 3 or 4 seasons ago. It happened all the time, where you would just be sitting in mid and there would be just some guy bombing you over and over again, and you knew that they didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah, there's nothing else to do.
Right. So it's like, he's there and now I have to play skill shot minigame. And I don't think laners are quite ready for that eventuality, that it's not only going to be them. You pointed out Zac. Zac is going to be incentivized now to pop into a lane and do something. And I'm sure there's other cases that I'm not even tracking in my head right now, where they're going to be justified in annoying you a lot more. And you're gonna, I feel like laners are gonna shortly wish that that the AFK farming Mundo was still a thing, because if you bump into the wrong jungle matchup, you're definitely going to feel a lot more heat from time to time. Do you agree with that? And do you have any other junglers in mind that might make use? Like, I know you said Zac.
I think laners tend to adjust to be pretty unhappy with any jungle meta, I find. They're not happy when junglers are ganking early. They're not happy when they have to give junglers prio for Scuttle. They're not happy when junglers like power farm to a higher level than them. So I just find that like laners just don't like junglers. They don't like any jungle meta. They're never happy with it. I agree that we're probably going to see some of that, right? The camps are not coming up as often. Junglers are going to have to find something to do. And a lot of that's just going to be kind of messing with one lane that they happen to be ending their clear near, right? Because there's nothing else to do. There's realistically not much else to do a lot of the time. So I think I agree. A lot of the shift that's going to happen for the junglers that do still like the full clear is the junglers that full clear and don't have a lot of agency after that. They're gonna feel kind of bad, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
They're just gonna potato around and not be able to do anything. On the other hand, the junglers that can full clear, but their kit has the agency to actually pressure a lane or like invade the enemy jungler, things like that, they'll feel a bit better, right? Because they can actually use that window really well. So for that reason, yeah, I agree. Something like Mundo, probably, unless you can get like a really free invade off and just like take the other dude's camps because he didn't take them, because he did like some kind of
like a 3 camp open.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want like red blue Gromp and you did like a red start full clear or Raptor start full clear, you can go in there, take his Raptors and Krugs, right? Then you're still a happy Mundo. But in the case that he took his camps, there's not much to do anymore, right? Your camps aren't going to be up for a while. Mundo can't really force any ganks. There's just really not that much to do. I guess you can sit yourself in a lane and throw some cleavers for a bit. So yeah, like
feels bad.
on the topic of Hecarim, we were talking about how you thought Hecarim would kind of die even more from this, and I was kind of on the other side of things. Yep. I think it goes both ways for Hecarim. The thing with Hecarim is that among full clear junglers, he has some of the best gank potential. That's
true. Yeah, that's true.
He has some of the most potential to actually force things to happen because his gap close is so stupid. Now, he lost a ton of burst and he can't really go the tank build anymore, but he still has his gap close, right? And oftentimes that's all you need. So from that angle, I think Hecarim might actually be okay. Right, he can full clear, and then he has some options on like things to actually do interact with the lanes afterwards. Yeah. On the flip side of that, Hecarim's like a fucking piss weak duelist, right? And when it comes to interacting with the enemy jungler in the early game, he loses out versus any decent duelist. He doesn't have like real significant pressure against the enemy jungler in the 1v1 or in early invades. So in that sense, if you're like matched into the enemy jungler on Hecarim, you both full cleared and you're just looking for something to do before your next spawn rotation is up, Hecarim can't really do anything. He generally loses out on the early 1v1s and 2v2s, especially after the nerfs. So from that angle, if that's how the game plays out, he's gonna feel bad. Right, he's not gonna feel great. So it's like it's hard to call it basically. Like there's positives and there's negatives of this change for a champ like Hec.
Guys, Phalaris wants to believe. That's how I feel. Phalaris wants to believe in the pony. Come on. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt.
I've still been playing Hecarim ever since the knee capping.
Yeah.
And honestly, from like a Hecarim mains perspective, he's fine, man. He's fine. He's dead in competitive because the tank build is dead. Yeah. For sure, you don't want to be going chem tank Hecarim anymore. But Bruiser Hecarim, it's nerfed, but it's fine. The reason you pick the champion is still the same.
Yeah, well, here's my point, is I actually agree with you in some regard. I think that if you get to your items, I think he's even or even stronger. If you're building out, if I'm not mistaken, if I read the patch notes previous correctly, if you can get to like Triforce, Death's Dance, I'm pretty sure he's doing more damage now.
Items.
Yeah, but
very marginally, about break even.
Yeah, so basically my logic then becomes like, I feel like you talked yourself into a corner. It's like he can't clear as well as he could. I mean, it's still okay because
it's exactly the same. His clear is
it the same? Yeah, I thought it was exactly a little slower. I thought it was like a couple seconds slower, but maybe I'm wrong.
None of the damage breakpoints even changed. His clear is identical.
Okay, cool. So let's say his clear is the same, but he's gonna pretty much lose most of the 2v2s that he's gonna get in the next patch. The only thing that I think you could sell to me is that idea of that the downtime, right? Like the downtime ganks that are going to come out. Mm-hmm. I think that should be the technical term that we use. It's the it's the downtime ganks. Like I got nothing else to do but fuck with you, buddy. Yeah, I'm fucking with you, buddy. Yeah, and then I think I'm thinking about other junglers though that might have some sort of value out of that. My initial
in that downtime.
Yes, I'm thinking Nunu is gonna love this patch. I think Nunu is all about it because he doesn't have to worry about the clock as much. Because I felt like Nunu's problem was the clock a lot of the time. You know, some guy picks Karthus, some guy picks like the old Hecarim, some guy picks Udyr, and they just power farm into oblivion, right? And it becomes very hard as Nunu to get anything going. Yeah, you really got to move fast, and I feel like Nunu's going to have a lot of fun in that downtime. And I also think if I'm looking through the list, I think Sejuani's probably going to love this patch too. Similarly to why you like Zac. Obviously, Sejuani's ganks aren't like incredible tier early, but they're pretty solid, and her 2v2 is actually pretty solid. And if she doesn't feel like she's going to she isn't going to just fall off the map after that first clear, which is what you were alluding to earlier, which I think is pretty damn good read. That's why I never liked playing Sejuani in solo queue, is because I just felt like, again, I was clocked out, and why would I play Sejuani when I could just play like a Nunu and tempo a little faster, right? But I don't know if there's anybody else that I'm really... I guess Ivern.
I'm not sure how I feel about Ivern right now. I have some thoughts on Ivern with regards to the catch-up EXP that we can get to later. I'm not so sure how I feel about Ivern right now. I don't have a clear read on him. I think maybe some other champions, not necessarily for low ELO per se, but Kha'Zix. Another champion with slightly slower clearing. He felt very under pressure in the same way that you're talking about for your champions. Okay. Because you'd finish your first rotation, and then by the time it's time to decide whether to gank or not, your second spawn's like starting to come up, right? And makes sense. You either give up on those or you go to the, So I think though that general archetype of jungler where they can still full clear, they still like clearing, but they're a little bit slower. All of those guys will kind of enjoy this patch.
So you think, I mean, when we're talking it out, I quite like the idea of this patch so far in my head. I'm not sure if I'm going to like it when I have to play, Dance Dance Revolution versus Spears, Nidalee Spears or something.
Yeah, no, from like an actual play perspective, quite a few junglers are going to feel a bit awkward, right? The downtime is like so significant at a 2:15 timer.
Yeah, that's gonna. I think at the end of the day, though, I think the laners are gonna be the ones that are, like you said. I think the laners are gonna be the one that are gonna be the most upset about it, because I think there's gonna be so many junglers that are like, yes, even more champions. Having Morgana in there and Diana in there, I feel like it's a breath of fresh air. I don't know if you agree with that. I personally love this jungle, yeah, I love it. I think this has been the most fun personally that I've had looking at, like, anytime I play jungle now, I'm like, oh, I'm not really pigeonholed into like 3 picks. Like, I feel like there's new stuff. There's like fresh blood. Like I even played Garen a couple times lately because of those old changes, even though he's not great, it's still fun. And I'm just really looking forward to it. And I think you agree though, right? There's probably gonna be a lot more junglers now that are in contest. It's not gonna be so top heavy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like both gank junglers and farm junglers are going to be fine. The in-between junglers are going to be fine, and they're also artificially sticking in a lot of extra junglers, right? With the Morgana changes, the Rumble changes, Diana changes. They're also doing, I think, Nautilus on the PvE right now.
I saw that too.
Nautilus is going to be fucking disgusting. He's going to be like instant A or S tier if those changes go through. He's just nasty. But yeah. Like the overall jungle diversity is great right now. It's nice, and they're expanding it even more, and I really like that.
Hey, what do you think about this? Someone just brought up Tahm Kench. This is kind of a funny discussion because I wasn't sure I believed in Tahm Kench until I saw one of my subs do it in one of the it was like the boot camp games. Yeah, well, it was weird because he had a plan, right? It wasn't like a troll pick. Like, he had a plan. Like, he did I think he did a 5 camp into taking Scuttle. And he literally just took Scuttle in the same way that Nunu takes the Scuttle. Do you know what I'm saying? He just yoinked it and ran off with it. And I'm like, wait a second. That's kind of like underrated. Do you agree or no?
Is like, I don't have a great read on Tahm because obviously it's not a very common pick. I haven't seen it around, but I've seen it in the past. And generally my perception of Tahm is that his clear is underrated. His clear is actually not bad. He can like 5 or 6 camp relatively quickly. Not like Udyr status, right?
I don't think you would ever 6. Solid. I don't think you would ever 6 with Tahm. I think you'd be trolling if you 6 with Tahm, personally.
If I recall correctly, his old 6 timer was actually around Scuttle. I don't know what it is right now. I'd have to.
No, I don't think it works. I don't think it times out. That's why I'm saying that. I don't think it times. But like 5, if you can guarantee Scuttle, good, if you can guarantee Scuttle, right? Like, you would agree with that. Like, 5 camp open is pretty much reserved for champions that can like I always use Nunu as like the classic example. It doesn't matter what you do. He takes the Scuttle from you. You can't stop it. So therefore, it's basically a full clear in my head. Like, that's how I compartmentalize it.
No, I don't agree with that.
You think somebody could stop it?
No, because there's 2 Scuttles, right? There's also the class of 5 campers who they basically try to end central. Like, a really common one is just a reverse clear, right? Like red, blue, Gromp into Wolves, Raptors, and then you head to whichever Scuttle's uncontested, right? So I think there's definitely another opening there. Like,
I see
something like Kha'Zix taking 5 camps, just going to uncontested Scuttle, pretty common, I think. So
I see what you're trying to say. Yeah, I was talking more purely off of just like aggressive 5 camp, not like you see what I'm saying, not like relinquish the Scuttle. I meant like if Nunu wants to take the Scuttle from you,
nobody's contesting that.
Yeah, he just kind of gets it, and then you actually, because you're facing Nunu, you kind of have to go, okay, I guess I just got to get away from this side because he's just going to get it regardless. which is kind
Tom
of
is similar, except he's like even more obnoxious 1v1. Tom is so hard to 1v1, man. He wins like everything.
Yeah, I'm kind of, that was one that I think actually might give value, because someone said it in chat and I wasn't even thinking about it until I saw it in my chat, and I'm like, oh, that's actually an okay one because of the same thing we were talking about. He's also on that timer, right? And he doesn't have those types of ganks where he needs a little bit more time to pull anything off. So it might actually make sense for him. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of an interesting little diversion.
Might be interesting to check out.
Yeah, that's a cool one. All right, so comeback experience. This is something that I think you're very, like, you know, I could have a conversation with you on some of the other stuff, but I haven't even been tracking this at all, and I know you have been. So what's the deal with comeback experience? Like, what's your read on it?
Okay. Comeback experience is obviously probably like the most controversial mechanic with regards to jungling, like over the league's lifespan. Most junglers fucking hate it, especially high elo junglers. They just tend to fucking hate it. This iteration of comeback experience is very different from the prior ones. All of the prior iterations, they were attached to the camp level. So it didn't matter if you were 10 levels under the average game level. If the camp level was 1, you wouldn't get catch-up experience. Everything was based on your level relative to the camp's level. Now, camps spawn at the average game level, but they don't level up dynamically, right? They're stuck at whatever level they spawn at. So with regards to old catch-up experience, there was a lot of gameplay involved where you would like mess around with rubber banding certain camps to get them to respawn at higher levels. None of that's going to come into play now. The new iteration of comeback experience is just purely based on your level versus the average level of the game. So if you're level 5, the average game level is 7. It doesn't matter if the camp's level 1, it's going to give you comeback experience. So that's how this iteration works. Now, what they added to counterbalance that is the 2-level minimum, right? That didn't used to be there. Before, if you were 1 level under the camp, you'd get a certain amount of comeback experience. Now there's the 2-level gap, and that's nice, right? Because you generally don't fall 2 levels under the average game level unless A, you're a really new jungler and you just suck at jungling, which is fine, but you know, doesn't really apply to high elo quite as much.
That's
or
true.
B, you just got like chain invaded and your game went to fucking shit.
You're getting
team is
owned.
behind, you're behind. Yeah, you're just getting smashed. Now, with regards to the 2-level minimum, I actually misunderstood this in like my first read of this change, because I was like, okay, 2 levels below the average game level, that's fucking hard. Right, you'd have to be even lower level than the dual laners generally. This doesn't happen much as a jungler, as an experienced jungler. But actually, I was like testing things out on PBE, testing things out in custom games to see like how much EXP I was getting at certain intervals, and I was getting like way more EXP than I felt I should be when I was taking a glance at the levels. And then I remembered how League's like leveling system actually works. It just makes no sense. But okay, let me give you the scenario. Let's say you're level 3, okay?
Yeah.
You're at 75% EXP, you're level 3. Everyone else in the game is level 4, and there's one dude who's level 6. The average game level is going to be, add everything together, it's going to be 41.
No.
And you divide that by 10, and you get 4.1, right? Average game level 4.1. Now, would you expect to get catch-up EXP here? You're level 3, almost level 4. And the average game level is 4.1.
That's so dumb. No, and I see. So that raises an interesting. Wow. Okay. Anyways, continue. Right. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, like generally speaking, it's not going to fall on a clean integer, right? It's going to come in some kind of decimal. It's going to be an average level 4.1, 4.3, 4.4, and you'd expect it to work like if the average level is 4.4, it rounds down to 4. If it's 4.8, it rounds up to 5, right?
Yeah.
Pretty logical. Not how it works. It rounds up no matter what. It never rounds down. So in that scenario where you're level 3, almost level 4, and the average game level is 4.1, you actually get comeback experience because 4.1 rounds up to 5. It doesn't make any sense.
So weird though. I would say in this case, it makes a funny circumstance, and I wonder how many times I've actually screwed games up with like how I play. And for example, let's say I play top lane, right? And I know that this change isn't live yet, but I've seen scenarios like this.
It's live now. It's live now.
Well, no, I know it's live now. I'm saying previous patches where it would be like, gotcha. I'm playing, I'm playing Tryndamere top or whatever top, right? And I'm just smashing a laner. and now I'm like 2 or 3 levels ahead of the lobby. I sometimes wonder how hard I'm fucking my team over. But you see what I'm saying with how like XP works? If I ever die, right? Like, did I just break the XP for the rest of the lobby, like for the other team? Like, if I die one time in a side lane because the enemy team just gets a boatload of XP. Right? Yeah, it's like I don't know how to gauge. And this sounds kind of similar to that almost, where it's like if someone happens to get massive, it's almost like it's like a chain reaction, right? Like they set off like jungle comeback XP signals everywhere, and now all of a sudden the enemy jungler's just getting massive out of nowhere, and you're just like, I don't understand how this guy closed the gap, and I don't feel like most of the players are even going to understand why the gap is getting closed. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like if someone gets mega massive, it's not going to be about the jungler, and it's not even really going to be about the whole room. I know you use that as an example, but it's not really going to be about the room. It's going to be about which guy is way out of line XP wise. That's going to trigger it.
I don't know if that one will apply that much here, because generally speaking, if you're really ahead, your counterpart's real fucking behind, right? If you're like level 14, he's probably level 11, level 10.
That's true.
It kind of balances out in that sense.
I see. That's a good point.
I don't think this is going to be the kind of thing, like, even though it's a really stupid rounding system, like really illogical, it's still not going to be the kind of thing that applies super regularly, right? It is still a 2-level gap. I don't think this is the kind of thing that you're going to be able to like play around, for example. It's still not, it's like a safety net. The safety net is higher than where you would want it to be, or where I would want it to be, but it's still a safety net, right? You still don't want to fall into it.
I see.
This isn't like past catch-up experience, because it was controllable, because it was tied to the camp levels, and there wasn't that 2-level minimum. You could do stuff like you would just clear a few camps, get level 3, permagank for the next 2 fucking minutes, put massive pressure on the lanes, and then you just hop back into your jungle, take a camp, and you're caught up. It was real stupid.
That is dumb.
I don't think this iteration is going to be abusable like that, even though the rounding system's kind of jank, which is good. I think this still does mostly apply for lower ELO players, for newer junglers, to help them stay in the game when they're behind. It's just that I think this might apply more often than you would otherwise expect, even in high ELO, right? If one team is kind of stomping pretty ahead in levels, the average level of the game is going to spike, right? And if that enemy jungler's not doing so hot, I was watching a few streams. I saw like a number of games where they were actually in range to get catch-up experience. And I don't know if that's fully intentional on Riot's part, because they stated that they wanted this to be like a low ELO thing for newer junglers.
It seems like junglers that, I could totally see like junglers that had kind of disappeared off the map. Like I always use Sejuani as like the example. I always think of there was the meta when I first got Challenger, when I was playing mid and then jungle secondary. And every time I got jungle, I think it was like season 7. It was like every time I got jungle, I kept playing Maokai and Sejuani. And they were in pretty good spot then. And I do wonder right now if those 2 champions in particular are going to really like this patch because of these types of changes. Like, I feel like anytime it's a tank jungler, they love slower games and they love catch-up XP, right? They love those things because it makes it so that they don't get punished nearly as hard when they do get punished. But whether it's, the ganks worked or people got far ahead in that levels, because they do scale, and they do scale to become quite scary. But it is one thing that we should definitely keep our eye on, because, like you said, I don't think it's by design that they want this weird, like, conditional catch-up XP, right? Where it's like someone just got fed and now the jungler gets huge off of it. It just seems very, very goofy. Smite changes. We didn't talk about this yet. This is an interesting one. This makes, to me, when I read this, I think we're going to have a lot of goofy coin flips at Baron. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think this one kind of compounds with the comeback EXP change, where if a jungler falls behind, in previous patches, they'd get punished pretty hard, right? They don't have a clear avenue back into the game. But now there's 2. They're like doubling up on the same patch, right? They're adding comeback EXP to come back into it, but also you can coin flip the Smite fights, right?
Every time.
Previously, if you're 3 levels down, if you're 4 levels down and you're fucked out of the game, it's hard to hit the Smite, right? It's hard to hit the Smite steal because your Smite just does a lot less damage. Now it does the same damage. So on 2 different levels, I don't know if I like this change for that reason. It becomes a lot more coin flip, right? It's kind of like arbitrarily rewarding the weaker jungler.
Yeah,
Even
I
though
agree.
maybe he got outplayed in the early game, right? So I find this one a little bit weird. Now, not to overstate it though, right? A lot of Smite fights don't come down to that little discrepancy in Smite damage, but you know, it still
And
is
solo,
there, right?
I disagree. In solo queue, that shit happens all the time, brother. That's like, it feels like it's every object. Maybe I'm playing a different game than you. Maybe I'm playing a different way.
My fucking Smite, bro.
No, I just meant that.
Blame this change.
Yeah. No, I just meant that when I say that, I just meant that I often see the scenario where the jungler is hovering around over the wall, because I feel like often, like, I feel like the real thing that's gonna swap is like people just aren't gonna go for these objectives as fast. Right, like they're just not going to do it.
More to fights potentially, right? Because you just don't have that solid advantage anymore.
Yeah, like it just seems really sketchy now. Because it used to be, it'd just be like, we'll just go for this. Like I don't care. Like he's 2 levels behind me. Like I'm just going to hit this shit. Like it's not a big deal. Like now you're going to be thinking in the back of your head, like, ooh, this motherfucker's got the same thing that I have. That's
it's also kind of scary in like super late game scenarios.
Yeah,
like 900 Smite. 1,000 was already not that big by late game, right? A lot of champions could outburst that, like Ori, Lux, Jinx. A lot of champions could already outburst 1K. 900 is kind of like a slap in the face for late game, right? I swear to God, I'm gonna be missing this shit all the time.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I'm overlooking that, the 1K to 900. That is very significant. Yeah. And it's gonna basically, and you think this is, I feel like this is what Riot wants. Like I feel like this is really
fights. Yeah.
They want not even that. I mean maybe in a micro standpoint. I just meant from the total like game standpoint. Like they want throws to happen more because they want players losing to win more often to get that like dopamine spike, right? That doesn't it makes the game not feel as miserable when you mostly get shit on in your sessions when the jungler just walks over and lucks the steal anyways, and you're like, haha. Right, that felt good, even though we were getting shit on. So, I don't know how I feel about this one. Of all the stuff that we went down the list on today,
this is the most sus for sure. I think it's on the flip side of it, though. Instead of level scaling, now it's 900 immediately after you use your first 5 smites. Right, that's real fucking weird too. That's a big fucking smite to have. Like, what is it? 8 minutes into the game. I think.
Yeah.
It's real weird. I think it inflates the value of runes like Cosmic Insight, for example, maybe CDR boots, because number one, you reach the 900 smite faster, and number two, you get more of them, right? In the mid game, that's a huge fucking smite. Real easy to take dragons, real easy to take Herald, and even just camp clearing, right? That's a big buff for it. So Cosmic Insight definitely going to be kind of insane on this patch, but just the general like idea of having a 900 smite 8 minutes into the game kind of weirds me out. Like,
I don't know, but I don't know how much that's going to impact. I guess you already touched on just like how it works with the dragons and the rifts, but like it really is just local to junglers though, because even this unsealed spellbook stuff, like that's super nuanced. Like how many times does an unsealed spellbook player steal anything, even though they will get the cool smite, I guess.
It's gonna be like in the mid game. In the mid game, it's way easier for jungler. Like early/mid, it's gonna be way easier for the jungler to secure the buff, or not the buff, but rather like dragons not get it stolen randomly by a laner. But later in the game, it'll be easier for laners to steal it.
I see what you're saying. So that is weird because it's almost like the only time it seems to matter is when the objectives really matter. Right? Yeah. Like the steal, the steal potential.
Granted, they do matter throughout, but it's just a weird change, right?
Yeah.
I don't quite understand why. I'm not going to say it's like explicitly bad, but I just don't understand why this happened. I
personally think this shit is pretty bad. All these other changes, I don't even mind them for the jungle, but this one to me just screams. Like, it just screams like, we just want solo queue to be more random, right? Like, that's how it feels. Like, it feels like it was a conscious, like, we really want teams that are winning to lose a little bit more, and that's what this feels like. Because you and I both know that most of these games are determined by like barons, elders, and like who got them, right? Literally, like that seems like how it is. Yeah. So this is gonna feel real shaky, and it's gonna take the community, I think, months to adjust to like we just don't go for the objective now like we used to. You know what I'm trying to get at? It's like it puts a weird spin on the game, and I don't think it's for the better necessarily. I guess it depends on where you
for the sake of change. Very, very strange. I don't think anyone was asking for this. The final change though with the Smite and any crowd control now breaks Rift Scuttle Shield. That one's kind of nice, right? Because
you like this
junglers were arbitrary. Because certain junglers were like arbitrarily punished, right? They just couldn't break the shield, and they just took fucking forever taking the first scuttle, especially like champions like Kayn, etc.
This is why I think Nidalee is gonna get a big rise.
Yeah, Nidalee like one shots that shit first rotation now.
Yeah, this was a. I honestly feel like Nidalee is just gonna absolutely dominate, like high elo everything. She's gonna have to be nerfed. Like, she's just gonna be so strong. I could visually see every scenario. She enjoys it. If you can get the clear down, which we could talk about another time. But if you can get the clear down, she's just gonna be loving this. Every single aspect of it. She can power farm if she needs to. She can pressure if she needs to. Now she loves the scuttle. I mean, she was already doing okay in high elo, so it's just, I don't know. What about the survivability stuff?
She was already doing great, I think. She was a good pick, and then she was like the third most commonly picked jungler MSI, something like that.
Yep.
Like she was already great, and I agree. I think she's going to get even better.
Yeah, she's going to be a problem on highest elos, like the highest tiers. What about this?
Okay, this one has to be looked at in conjunction with the change right below it.
Okay.
Basically, what they're doing is they're lowering the Omnivamp on jungle items, which is understandable, right? It's been real fucking high, and by mid game, a jungler can heal the full off of like 1 or 2 camps from the Omnivamp. Really obnoxious. So I agree with them toning it down. Now, to compensate, they lowered the base AD on pretty much every jungle monster.
I see. We'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. So it's down here.
And then they also raised the smite healing. Now, what this comes down to in terms of numbers is if you're considering an early full clear, if you take all 6 camps, it's about 16,000 HP in total across all the monsters in 6 camps, level 1.
Okay.
So a 10% to 8% Omnivamp nerf means you're losing a little bit more than 300 HP off your early clear, off that change. And this is roughly balanced out by the smite heal increase and the AD reductions. Now, earlier on, I think a lot of people, including myself, were expecting this change to enable a lot of off-meta junglers that had like less healthy clears, right? Because of these big AD reductions. I've since changed my mind on that because I've actually gone in and tested on quite a few junglers. Tested on Amumu, Silas, a good number of the junglers that are a little bit slower and less healthy. I don't think these changes enable anyone.
Okay.
These changes don't really hurt much either, but they don't really enable any new off-meta champions because it just kind of balances out, right? You don't end up significantly healthier than you already were.
Got it. So you were probably cross-referencing with the previous patch, and then got it. No, cool.
Yeah, because if you look at these changes, a lot of the AD reductions, they're really minor on blue, red, and Gromp. They're really minor on the single target camps. Gromp lost 2 AD. They're significant on the Little Raptors and the Wolf camps. But the thing is, a lot of junglers just turbo clear fucking Wolves and Raptors, right? They just pop them.
Got it.
A lot of junglers didn't struggle on those camps anyways. So overall, I think it roughly breaks even for most champions. And the champions that do benefit a little bit are the ones that take Wolves and Raptors real fucking slow. And they tank a lot of damage from those camps. Those guys are a little bit noticeably healthier on Wolves and Raptors. So I'd say like Kindred, just guys with a little bit weaker AoE early.
Got it. Cool. And then the gold changes. I mean, I don't think this is what is this? Just to balance out the spawn timers being longer? That's what this was? So it should feel about the same, right? Am I reading this right?
No, it doesn't quite balance it out. It's still a net loss, a big net loss in EXP and a net loss in gold. This does give a little bit of it back, and also they gave more gold to the inner camps. They gave more gold to wolves and raptors, and not as much to Gromp and Krugs. It just is what it is. It doesn't quite balance out the gold loss though.
So I think we've covered about everything here. This was a good talk. I guess to summarize, we probably I know you said no tier lists, but I'm thinking in terms of newbie champs. Right, we've already talked a little bit about what we think will be kind of higher elos, and I think I could reiterate. I think Nidalee is going to be fine. I think Morgana, unless she's nerfed, is going to be a monster.
More Rumble are still going to be monsters.
Yeah,
15
Rumble's
does not lower.
Well,
the
Rumble, I'm not. Rumble, I'm still not sure about, because Rumble can't really leverage. Rumble's whole thing comes from 6, or do you disagree? I feel like he doesn't really do much pre-6. I think
I think the thing with Rumble is like he's got very few weaknesses. He can be invaded early because of his like weird W start level 1 thing, but he has very few weaknesses as a champ right now. Okay. His clear speed is super healthy and super fast. He's resourceless. He has great scaling. He has great objective control because of his ult. His dueling is fucking disgusting. Like
they did just buff him too.
He just one shots everything.
Yeah, no, maybe I'm underrating him. I used to play him, so I have my reservations with him, but I haven't played him since the buffs. And I guess to double on what you're saying, I guess he does benefit as well from the scuttle change also. I don't know if was he smiting scuttle standard?
Yeah, he couldn't break it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he was going to scuttle with smite up though. Was his MO normally or no? Because I don't know his clear.
Okay. This is like a thing that I see like a big disparity between high ELO and low ELO opinions on it. A lot of low ELO junglers, when they look at my clears, like my clears are leashless. I usually use both smites in the clear because it's leashless. And I get a lot of comments like, why the fuck aren't you saving your second smite for scuttle, man? Like you need second smite. Yeah. And like it's usually the lower ranked junglers who are saying that. You don't need your second smite for scuttle most of the time. Scuttle is usually not contested.
The reason I asked though,
when it is contested.
Well, the reason I asked though is purely because I agree with you, actually. But the only reason I'm even asking this is because of I wasn't sure of what Rumble's clear actually looked like before this change. That's what made me brought this up. Like.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying?
He could go either way. Like he could save the smite, he could not save the smite. It didn't make like a huge difference. I would have saved it personally because he ends his clear generally with like a double camped blue Gromp. So they if you balance your damage correctly, they die to AoE at a similar time anyways. So I would have been saving smite, but it's not like a huge deal.
Well, I figured it would matter a little bit now because of the shield break.
Yeah, now for sure he's going to want to save it.
Yeah,
now for sure a lot of junglers are going to want to save it.
Because my reservation with the Rumble pick, and I've been kind of hating on it, like subtly hating on it, is because I've always felt like in solo queue, I wasn't in love with Rumble as a jungle pick, even though I know that win rate wise, he's doing okay. I've never been in love with him because I've always felt like he's literally just a, I go 6 and then I start ulting shit. And I've always felt like that's very binary. And then I feel like, when they change this, when they go through these changes and we're delaying that 6 spike a little bit more, I feel like that definitely hurts him since I feel like his whole kit is tied to the 6. Unless people just bump into him at a bad time, and then yes, he will still do well, but who knows? I could be completely wrong about this guy. He's obviously doing well for a reason. So you say Rumble, Morg. I say Nidalee is probably going to be looking really good in high elo. The standards, I think the Elises, I think Zach will take a rise in high elo.
For sure, I think so too.
Any champion that was early game already is probably happy. So anybody that was doing well, so the Nunus, the Ramesses.
Yeah, overall, it's like a slight shift away from farming, slight shift towards gank pressure, right? So any gankers that were already okay are going to be a little bit better probably.
And then newbie picks. I think Nocturne's still there.
I think Nocturne's for sure still there. He's just so fucking easy, right? He clears real fast. He clears real healthy. He picks objectives well. He's just easy to play.
Yep.
And he scales a little bit better than he used to because he mostly goes for the bruiser build now instead of lethality. Lethality tends to fall off faster.
And you can very easily misplay lethality, whereas with bruiser, I don't think it's nearly as easy to fuck up.
More forgiveness there. I think Xin Zhao is going to be nice.
Okay.
Amumu, I think, is still going to be fine. Skarner. A lot of these like kind of farm junglers that scale well, but they're a little bit on the slower side, I think are going to do quite well, like Skarner and Mumu. Especially in low elo, right? These champions traditionally already do well.
Yeah. I'm wondering about... I'm trying to think of picks that might... Because, you know, I'm a little sad because I used to fist pump, be like, pick Mundo every time, guys.
Yeah,
and
Mundo,
now I don't.
Every game.
Yeah, I don't really feel like Mundo holds.
I don't think there's like a very, very, very clear winner like that anymore because it's just not that kind of meta where that archetype of champion is like clearly dominant, right? But there's a lot of picks that are fine, like Amumu, Volibear, Zac, Xin Zhao, Skarner, Nocturne. We already mentioned.
Yeah.
I think all these guys are going to be pretty good. Rammus, once the Nautilus change comes in, he's going to be fucking god tier.
Yeah, maybe Nautilus, dude. Maybe that's the one. Maybe that's the one we hype up. That one goes. Yeah.
I don't think I think those changes are going to be like toned down before they go live though. It's so fucking disgusting, man. Like, okay, so Nautilus is like the same archetype of champion as like Sejuani, Nunu, Rammus, right? These guys are all gated behind slightly slower clear speeds early because they're just tanks. They're really easy. They scale really well. They have really good hard engage and gank potential. Nautilus is the same thing, but even more so, right? His hooks are fucking nasty. His CC's nasty. And now he full clears in under 315 leashless. It's like, what the fuck? It's like...
Oh my god!
There's no way they can ship it like that. They have to tone the numbers a little bit because he's just going to be an instant meta pick for most of the ladder.
He's going to be instant meta pick for high elo even. If that clear holds, like Nautilus is great, man. Like you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with that hard CC. That's a god tier pick. And if you don't have to stick him down low and he actually gets some XP, that's the same problem he used to have with top lane. I don't know if you remember that. Where he was going top lane and just building a fucking double Doran's ring and just...
I remember he was originally intended as a jungler and he ended up in like every fucking lane except jungle. Like he ended up top with full tank and then he ended up mid with like proto belt Zhonya's.
Doing B was like shoving mid with him. Like this fucking champion is AIDS. I don't know why they think, and I'm laughing about it because it's so stupid. Like he's so broken. If he's like on the line of like comp viability, he is so stupidly broken. He's already broken in low elo. Like you just pick Nautilus as support and just hook a moron and then you fucking snowball the game,
They're
right?
Just fucking dead. And you can imagine like these champions like support Leona, support Nautilus. They already fucking 1v1 the ADC with support income. Like, can you imagine them with like jungle income, but not just jungle income, but like hard farming jungle income? Because for some reason he turbo clears the jungle now. Holy shit! Like what the fuck?
That's the one. That's the one that we'll keep an eye out on. And then I agree with you though. Overall, I think we've touched on some pretty good topics. I think the big losers here are unfortunately a lot of the power farmers. I think when you really go through the list, yes, you're right. You could play anything, but from a win rate standpoint, you're gonna feel pretty sad after all these changes start adding up. I mean,
the power farmers that have like less agency to do stuff in the dead time are gonna feel.
What did we call it? The downtime ganks.
Yeah, downtime ganking, downtime invading.
Yeah, that's not gonna feel great. But I do suspect a lot of Mundos will be chucking a lot of cleavers.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I think a lot still plays out in terms of the jungler you're versus, right? Because Mundo's a great counter jungler, right? Mundo, Shyvana, even if he's not a great ganker, he clears so fast and he's great at just heading into the enemy jungler and quickly stealing camps. Counter jungling, like a lot of people ask about it whenever camp timers are changed.
Oh yeah, I didn't even. Yeah, I forgot to ask.
Is counter jungling going to get stronger? Is it going to get weaker?
Yeah.
It always goes both ways. on one level, counter jungling gets more punishing, right? Because you head in there, you take the camps, they're not going to respawn for a longer duration of time. So it's more punishing for the enemy jungler. But on the other hand, it gets harder to find proper intervals to counter jungle, right? Because his camps are down for longer. If you head in there, they might not be up yet, right?
Or if you do catch the camp, if you catch the camp, that guy actually had time to come home.
Yeah. If you like stayed late first rotation to go take his Krugs, maybe he's back, right?
Yeah.
If you stayed too long.
I think we've all
that's
been
going to
there.
be a little bit awkward. I could see it going both ways. Like counter jungling itself is more punishing now, but it may be a little bit harder to counter jungle in many scenarios actually.
I
So,
think if you
it goes
do the
both ways.
thing, I think if you do the thing where you like leave a small golem or like a small chicken or something, I think that is probably more damaging than it used to be. Obviously, because the respawn timer will be longer for when they clear it, when they finally get to clearing
I
it.
wanted to mention that briefly because they changed the gold respawn thing from 15 seconds to 10 seconds.
Okay.
First off, I don't know why they did that. That feels a little bit arbitrary, but
Yeah.
To the low elo viewers, something I highly recommend doing to get used to the patch or even extended, like if you want to keep doing it, is time the camps, man. Especially when you're counter jungling, time the camps, because your internal clock. This is like if in the middle of the fucking season you go up to a laner and you go, instead of every 30 seconds, the waves are going to come every 40 seconds. Like what the fuck? Who does that in the middle of the season? It's like why are they doing this in the middle of the season? Number one. But number two, it just really throws off your internal timer, right? Because as a laner, all your back timings, all your roam timings, they're all based on when the next wave is coming in. So you're not missing the waves. And as a jungler, the camp respawns are your wave timings, so to speak. So for a lot of junglers, their internal clocks are going to be kind of thrown off, right? The dead time is going to be a lot longer than usual. So what I would recommend getting in the habit of is just timing your first or last camp in a clear rotation. Like if you go Gromp, Wolves, Raptors into Krugs, if you kill the Gromp at 6 minutes, for example, you just type 8:15, right? Add 2 minutes, 15 seconds, and you know Gromp is respawning at 8:15 and everything else is coming up after that. That can help you get acquainted with the new timers. It's also really nice for if you're going on counter jungle rotations, right? Because if you're going in there, you take his Raptors at 8 minutes and you type 10:15, then you know to be back there by 10:15. Now, with the old 15-second timers, it wasn't as punishing, right? You'd see a decent amount in advance when the camp would be coming up.
Oh, I
but
see where
now
you're going
that
with
it's
this.
10 seconds, right? If you're kind of far from it, you're not going to be able to get over in time in many scenarios.
Yeah,
you're
you're
just gonna
not.
be too far on the map.
It's almost like
Yeah.
It's almost like they've turned that timer into a bit of into a haha, you're too late.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It's
that is
like,
weird.
The timers are longer now, and the respawn indicator is shorter. So if you've been the jungler, like the lazy jungler that just relies on the gold hourglasses coming up, be careful, right? You're gonna get
that's
like
a good,
passively nerfed.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that a lot. So dude, this was a good talk, man. I think we touched on a lot of stuff, and I think I mean, I personally appreciate you diving in deeper because I haven't had time, especially with this like comeback XP stuff. I love this, and you've clearly put some thought into how this with testing the AD changes and the Omni Vamp stuff. I think I've got a pretty good handle, and I think everybody's got a pretty good handle now. So thanks as always, guys. This goes on YouTube. 100% this goes on YouTube. Falaris is one of my coaches on NEACE.gg. You can book him at any time. He's a great jungle coach. He's a good friend of mine. You will not be disappointed. I know I tend to be busy on my bookings quite a bit, so you can always grab him. You will be very, very happy. Yeah, man, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And we'll put your YouTube channel, and we'll put your YouTube channel on the description and all that stuff as always. And yeah, buddy, I'll talk to you later.
All right, talk to you later.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.